IUL is the least predictable insurance product that exists because the only predictable thing about an index universal life policy is that the performance of the policy is not going to be what you see on the illustration. It's not going to be anywhere close to that. Banks aren't stupid. They understand the risk that goes along with IUL, and so they're not going to let you leverage that because they understand that there's a risk and there's a chance that money could be lost. If it weren't the case, listen, if you think you're going to outsmart the bankers on that, I don't know what to tell you. Good luck. Hey, what's going on, cash flow hackers? It is Chris with Life 180, and for this video, I'm going to be doing a review on Chapter 3 of Doug Andrews' book, The Laser Fund. Now, if you're watching this and you're like, he's been doing these reviews on the Laser Fund kind of for a while, I'm doing them, I'm going through it, I'm getting to these videos. It takes a lot of time for me to kind of go through the book and read it and organize everything, and quite frankly, I'm creating a ton of other content, got a lot of stuff going on, creating some cool things kind of behind the scenes, and I don't know what happened. I missed Chapter 3. I think I recorded it, skipped over it, doesn't matter, but here we go. We're getting into Chapter 3 now. I'm kind of circling back. We're just going to insert this into the playlist. So if you're watching this, you may see it in or out of order, depending on when you watch it. But what I want to do is hop right into Chapter 3. This is titled, What Successful Folks Know. And there's a lot of things in this chapter that I actually agree with. Once again, it just comes down to the execution. So let's get into this. So first and foremost, he goes through this. He talks about predictability. He talks about an exercise. I'm not going to get into all the different nuances, but he talks about, if you can go through with certain variables, you can ask certain questions, create predictability in the answers that you're going to get from people. And when you create predictability, ultimately, you know what outcome is going to come from it, and therefore you could be more effective with whatever you're doing, right? So predictability is right here. He says predictability is critical in many aspects of life, business especially, our finances. I'm a big believer. One of the statements that I use all the time is you want to make sure you have a financial strategy that gives you the most predictable result possible, right? And that's a big thing. And so, not to jump ahead, but I got to say this at the top of my mind, my biggest complaint about Index Universal Life, which is what he uses for the Laser Fund, is if this happens to be the first video that you're watching, is that IUL is the least predictable insurance product that exists because the only predictable thing about an Index Universal Life policy is that the performance of the policy is not going to be what you see on the illustration. It's not going to be anywhere close to that, right? So it's kind of crazy. So here we go. It says, in planning for your financial future, I'm just going to go through here and read what I have in highlighted because I know I did that. I have it all highlighted and whatever for a reason. So I'm going to read it and then we'll talk about it. So in planning for your financial future, there are some things that are predictable, like taxes. We can bet they will always be there. They're likely to go up over time. And during retirement, you're likely going to be in a tax bracket that is higher than during your earning years. I agree with all of that, right? Like, so taxes are never going to go away. They're likely to go up over time. I've been doing a lot of videos on this. Taxes are going to have to go up. We have too much debt, too many unfunded liabilities, too much going on. We're printing too much money. We got to make up for that somehow. Tax revenue is going to be the only way that can ultimately happen. So that I agree with wholeheartedly. And I agree with the fact that your tax bracket is likely going to be higher when you retire. Here's the deal. A lot of people are taught, a lot of advisors teach people and kind of coach people to the fact that your tax bracket is actually going to be lower. But the reality is, I think where we are right now in this world, the sheer nature of the fact that I think the whole tax environment is going to be increased. Even if you were earning less money, you took less income because you didn't need as much because maybe your house is paid off, even though I'd argue that that's a different video that I have. You can actually click on it above, how to pay off your mortgage. It's something that I think no matter how you slice it, whether you have more income because you had a really good plan and you were successful, or whether you planned effectively and your taxable income was lower, right? No matter what, because of the nature of the tax environment we live in, I think taxes are going to go up. So I agree with that. So these three marvels are what affluent and successful folks know. folks have implemented for generations. They have compound interest, tax favored accumulation, and safe positive leverage. So here's one of the things that I talk about. Whole life insurance beats index universal life every single time with this, because from a compounding interest perspective, whole life insurance is going to grow guaranteed every year over time. And we know that on a predictable basis, whole life insurance is going to grow. Whereas index universal life, if you look at all of the disclaimers in the illustration, it shows it's not an investment, and this can lose. And if you don't fund it properly, it can lose. And the insurance costs go out of whack. You just go way out of balance. The insurance charges, as you get older, I've seen too many IULs lapse because of lack of funding, not because they weren't funded properly, but because of the fact that they didn't perform. Cap rates get reduced. If you see the illustration run at 10%, right? But then cap rates get reduced to 9%, then 8%, and 7.5% over the years. That happens in these policies, right? And so no matter what, the market doesn't have to significantly underperform if the insurance company drops your cap rates. And the deal is they don't market the reduction in cap rates. They do that only after you're in the policy, right? So that's something to be, to consider when you're thinking about that. Tax favored accumulation, I would say that whole life and IUL, I mean, they're the same type of vehicle from a tax perspective, so they have the same tax favored accumulation component to it. I just think because whole life is more predictable, I like it more, and it's safe positive leverage. Whole life insurance is a better safe positive leverage vehicle because you can utilize things like cash value lines of credit. Like you can go to a bank. I could get you a whole life policy that's getting you a 5.25% dividend right now. You can have your money growing at that rate every single year, and I could go get you a cash value line of credit. I could help you. I could connect you with a banker that could do that for you. A cash value line of credit simply looks at the value of your cash value, net cash value in your policy, surrender value, and they look at that and they say, okay, we know that your whole life policy is a financial fortress. So we're willing to take that as collateral, and you can collateralize that cash value, and we're going to give you a loan at, right now, I know a bank that's doing it for the federal funds rate plus 1%, right? So if you can get that right now, that's like 1.25% loan. So you could build in a 4% positive arbitrage with the cash value in your life insurance, in your whole life insurance policy. You can't do that in IUL. There's no other product on the face of the earth, in fact, that you can do that with. So if I did that, for instance, I could then take that money. This is amazing. It's like one of the best hedges ever, but you can only do it with a whole life policy. These banks will not allow you to do a cash value line of credit like that with an index universal life policy. Why? Banks aren't stupid. They understand the risk that goes along with IUL, and so they're not going to let you leverage that because they understand that there's a risk and there's a chance that money could be lost. If it weren't the case, listen, if you think you're going to outsmart the bankers on that, I don't know what to tell you. Good luck. That's what it is. As an illustration, let's say you're putting away $500 a month, earning 7.2% with simple interest. After 10 years, you have set aside $60,000. Here's the bottom line. I talk about this all the time. You're never going to earn 7.2% with an IUL. You're never going to do it. Even if the index gets you 7.2%, after the cost of charges and fees and everything, the best you're really going to be shooting for an internal rate of return is in the mid fives, right? So all of these examples that he's giving are a joke. They're just not possible. And once again, going back to, let me say this. They're inflated to make it seem more sexy and more attractive, but the policy is never going to perform like this. These are hypothetical numbers that he sells based on, well, if the index is whatever and it will perform at a certain amount, it doesn't take into consideration what will be pulled out of, for charges for the policy. And it doesn't take into consideration how it performs on negative years. He does that in other parts of the book, but he doesn't do it here. Now, after 10 years, he said you set aside $60,000 for a total. So he's talking about the difference, simple and compound interest, right? So talking about if you put it in and you compound, but the bottom line is in an IUL, you're never going to earn 7.2%, right? Like I think that's really important to understand. I don't think I need to explain simple and compound interest. Simple interest, he's saying you only earn $1,980. Compound interest, you'd earn $28,026. So there's a big difference. He's pushing the fact that wealthy people, successful folks know about compound interest and they take advantage of it, and that's what they want to do. So he goes and shows this graph about how when you save $500 a month, earning 7.2% over 40 years, and you compare simple interest to compound interest, this is what happens. This is what your money looks like. And it's a great graphic. I say good graphic. It's a great graphic because it shows a point, a principle. What I don't like about it is he leans on this 7.2% number in other ways throughout other parts of the book. Seems to be a number that he likes to lean on. Maybe it's because of the indexing strategy that he uses, and that's what's being used. But it's not a good number. So now this is another thing he talks about: compounding, folding a piece of paper. He's got a graph here, talks about how big it gets, and you can see it when you just keep folding it, doubling the size of the thickness of it. Even the size of a little piece of paper gets extremely thick as it goes there, and it shows the power if you get started a little later, how compounding works against you, so on and so forth. He also gets into the benefits of tax-favored accumulation. That's where we are right now. Really, really good stuff. He talks about a dollar doubling 20 times, gets into the principles of, if it grows when it's tax-deferred, what the consequences are, what it looks like tax-favored, what it looks like as tax-earned at 25% tax bracket and 33% tax bracket, and how it actually kills you. You go from thinking you have over $1 million accumulation, and it ends with a $72,000 or $27,000 pile of money, right? Like, so it's a big deal when you look at the comparison between the two. And so, once again, this is another area I agree. Understanding these principles is extremely important, right? Like, does it work exactly like he's saying? No, he's using extreme examples to prove a point. Now, I have no problem with that because I mean, everybody does the same thing. I think if you use these extremes and then back out to understand, okay, then that's cool. I agree with that wholeheartedly. So when people hear us teach this, they say my money's in an IRA or is in IRAs and 401ks and grows tax deferred. Isn't that better than taxed as earned? Well, it's better than being taxed during the accumulation phase, but it still doesn't help you during the distribution phase, right? So we talk about this as the accumulation versus distribution phase. We've talked about that a bit, but the bottom line is, while we talk about the accumulation versus distribution phase, I think it's important to understand that when you're investing in a tax deferred vehicle, it's not, a lot of people think that you get tax deductions, because you get that for that year, but it's really not a deduction, it's a deferral. And where are taxes going to be? I think taxes are going to go higher. And so once again, I'm not going to read all this, but I will say I agree with most of what he says there because he's just speaking to that point. Allianz conducted a survey that said that 61% of boomers said they feared outliving their retirement money more than they feared death, right? So it's reclaiming the future. Challenging retirement income perceptions, May of 2010. Remember, that was like 2 years after the retirement crisis, so a lot of people were really hurt right now. I think if they were due to do that survey again today, it would be a little different. There's probably more concern than there was pre-2008 because people are, woke up to it. But the bottom line is people aren't awake enough to realize the risk that we are in for a correction right now either. I put here later, he's going to pitch that IUL is a solution, and it is not, right? Because using IUL as a retirement alternative, one of the biggest challenges that I have is he's putting people who are 50 years and older into an IUL. Now, I'm not a fan of IUL in general, but when you're 50 and up, I have a real big problem with it because we got 10-year surrender schedules on this, and so the money doesn't even have a real big chance to start accumulating and doing anything for you. You need at least, if this is going to happen, if you think about doing an IUL, if you even think about it, my opinion is you need at least 30 years for this thing to accumulate. If you can't give it that much time before starting to take a distribution from it for a tax-free income at retirement, and if you want to use it as a supplementation, if you're just kind of headstrong thinking this is the way you want to go, then at least go at it from that perspective using those parameters is what I would say. The marvel of safe leverage. Let's see here. So he says there's a third kind of person in the world who understands that leverage is willing to pay some interest to earn even more interest. So I actually talked about that earlier, right? So this is the thing. He talks about being able to use your money to earn compound interest. Now, this is a big problem that we have with index universal life illustrations, is that when you illustrate them with AG 49A regulations, they actually allow you to bake in 50 basis points, so a half a percentage point of positive arbitrage when illustrating loans. So it shows the policy always growing. Now, when you look at that, it's going to show that, once again, that nice fat disclaimer telling you, listen, this is not guaranteed. You understand that if you borrow, you are going to put significant risk at this policy lapsing. Every company says it a little differently, but that's pretty much what they're saying is if you borrow from this and use it for income, you are putting this policy at significant risk of lapsing, and that's on you, right? So if you have an agent that tries to run it without showing income, but telling you to take income from it, it's because they don't want you to see that disclaimer. So just understand that. So what they're saying here is the third person understands that, it's okay to pay interest if you want to leverage and you're paying interest to earn more on it. That's cool. The problem is with an IUL, they're saying there's two types of loans. There's a fixed loan. Some companies call it different. A lot of people call it a wash loan. So what they do is they put your money in a fixed account. So you pay 5%, you earn 5%, or you pay 4%, you earn 4%. It's a wash loan, no harm, no foul, but there's really no arbitrage there, right? But the other way is an index loan. And they like to say that, hey, you can pay 4% for an index loan, but if your policy earns 7%, you get that 3% arbitrage. But the problem is, if the policy gets 0, you're still paying that 4%, so it creates a problem. And if you get 0 a couple of years in a row, and then you take 0 plus the insurance charges and admin charges and all the expenses, you actually get a negative return on the policy that increases the net amount at risk of the policy. And when you're in your 60s and 50s, and when you start in your 50s, is why I hate them in the 50s for income, because if you start that in your 50s and then at 65 you start taking income and then you have a couple negative years in a row, your policy is gonna explode on you. It's gonna be a huge problem. I promise you. Like it is ugly, catastrophic. Don't do it. Something to think about. Once again, going back to what I was saying before, that's why I like whole life. Because you can bake in a positive arbitrage on a guaranteed basis if you just leverage the tools the right way. People just need to think outside of the box. And I could do that for you, show you how to do that on a guaranteed basis if you're interested in having that conversation. You can look in the link below and set up a conversation. I'm happy to talk to you. So most people have a mortgage because they don't have the cash. So, so he's just talking in here about leverage, the cash. People use leverage all the time by buying a mortgage. They do that. Everybody buys a home because they understand leverage. No, everybody buys a home because they have no money. Everybody buys a home and gets a mortgage, I should say, because they don't have the cash to buy, pay cash. Now, I'm not saying paying cash is the way to go. In fact, I don't. Once again, watch my How to Pay Off Your Mortgage, How to Pay Your Mortgage, and I go through all the nuances of that. And I think that's a really good video. Very basic leverage concepts, I say. So if you've read this book, it's awesome. Whole life. So the nation, so this part bugs me. The nation's top banks put at least 30 to 40% of their tier 1 assets to work in financial vehicles that earn rates of return that are 6 times more than you're paying for those assets. Now, here's the deal. He likes to talk about tier 1 assets, and he likes to lump his conversation about index universal life. Banks don't use index universal life as tier 1 assets. They use whole life insurance as a tier 1 asset. IUL doesn't go there. And if you want to learn more about that, I actually interviewed Barry Dyke. I did a 4-part series with Barry Dyke, who was the author of Pirates of Manhattan, who basically is the one who brought all of this to people's attention and did more research on this topic than anybody has ever done in this industry. It's an amazing book. He did 2 versions, the Pirates of Manhattan and then the Pirates of Manhattan, The Road to Serfdom. Both just, you have to be a total geek and just like a numbers guy to read it, or a numbers person to read it. But if you're looking at putting a significant amount of money into this to really understand, I would say go look at those books. It's amazing. It's only whole life. So the fact there's so much deception here, and he likes to, it's like a bait and switch thing. Like he likes to talk about it in terms of like, hey, this is what banks are doing. with this vehicle, they use insurance as a tier one asset. Well, no, they use whole life insurance, not index universal life insurance, because it's not the same thing. He just talks about the four phases of retirement planning: contribution, accumulation, distribution, and transfer. I've talked about those. He's talked about those in other parts of the book. This is just repeating some of the other stuff he talked about. And then let's just go through the 5 big takeaways. I'll give a summary of it, and then we'll just call this a video. Just like Denmark, kangaroo, so he talks about predictability is key, especially when it comes to financial strategies. I agree. That's why I don't like index universal life. The only predictable thing, once again, is the fact that it's not going to perform. It's just not. It's not going to perform how it shows on the illustration. It's going to underperform. The 3 marvels of wealth accumulation can predictably provide opportunities for financial growth. The marvel of compound interest, the marvel of tax-favored accumulation, and the marvel of safe leverage. I don't disagree with any of that. You need all of those things, and if you can get a vehicle to do that, I think awesome. Once again, I think whole life insurance wins at all 3 of those. The marvel of safe leverage, especially because of the surrender schedule with index universal life. There's always going to be a big surrender schedule the first couple of years with index universal life. You're not going to have a lot of liquidity to that money. So if that's important to you, I work with a lot of real estate investors, a lot of business owners who, losing a lot of the liquidity is not really an option. And so, there's 2 components to that. If you're over 50, IULs are dangerous. And if you need liquidity, IULs are not right for you. So that's where whole life, you can keep a really high percentage of your money liquid starting like within the first 30 days of the policy. So it's really, really good for real estate investors and for business owners. The 4 phases of retirement: contribution, accumulation, distribution, and transfer. All basic stuff, really good. Like, I don't disagree with that at all. It's good. The most important phase to protect from taxes is during accumulation, because you don't want to be losing control of that money and paying taxes. It interrupts the ability to compound. So I agree with that. To sprint towards retirement, you want to be able to contribute after-tax dollars in a tax-favored environment. Access your money tax-free, transfer income tax-free to your heirs. That's the benefit of tax-free death benefit to your heirs. Agree with him on that, and so I ultimately agree with number 5. So, that's it. So anyway, I know if you are thinking about getting a laser fund with Doug Andrew and them, I would implore you to at least consider some of the things that I talked about. If you want to have a conversation with somebody on my team about some alternatives, some different ways to think about some of the concepts in this book and some of the things that he laid out that are true, but really have a more guaranteed and ultimately more predictable result out of the plan, reach out to us. There's going to be a link in the description below. If you have any comments, any questions, feel free to make a comment. I will do my best to engage with every single one that comes through. And until next time, have a blessed, inspirational day, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.